Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good? Interested? Geared up for the day. We all are, aren't we? Well and truly. Thank you very much to the previous speaker. I really appreciated your timeline. You saw the topic that I've got, 60,000 years and still continuing strong. So my challenge is to get you to think back beyond the timeline that the previous speaker gave us, so beyond the 1960s and right back across 60,000 years of Aboriginal history in this country. My topic was sustainable development, 60,000 years and counting, and Indigenous perspective on sustainability. I'm standing here with you as a rainforest Aboriginal person. My country is Willamilla, that wonderful waterfall up there, and the Mamu people from the greater Innisfail region. I work in my local area, and I also work with rainforest people in the Tablelands district, so what we might call the Central Wet Tropics, and then right across this World Heritage area, which if you put a different sort of a framework around it, translates as an absolute cultural footprint, the cultural footprint of a distinct biocultural group in Australia, rainforest Aboriginal people. So I stand here sharing some of my information with you as a rainforest Aboriginal person. There are 18 distinct traditional owner groups. I don't know if you can see that really well in the rainforest area. We extend from just south of Cooktown in the north to north of Townsville in the south. As I said, there are 18 distinct traditional owner groups. There's about 6 distinct language groups, so big mother tongue language groups as distinct as German and English and French across that area. There are about 100 clans, and we're still counting. There are hundreds of extended family groups, and we have about 20,000 rainforest Aboriginal people. We say that we've been here since time immemorial. Torres Strait Islanders have a beautiful concept. They call it before time. Before time, 60,000 years. I pay my regards to CAFNET for your 30 years of work and commitment in caring for this country that we share together in Far North Queensland. I thank you to the organisers for ensuring an Aboriginal focus. I wouldn't have expected anything less, absolutely, but we pay our regards to that. Because it sort of mirrors the relationship that we are building between rainforest Aboriginal people and the community of environmentalists, conservationists, and just simply people who care about who we are as people living in country. I want to step a little bit in a bigger picture than a localised or a regionalised rainforest picture. Aboriginal people are one of the world's estimated 350 million Indigenous people, spread across more than 70 countries. Every single continent has Indigenous people except for the Antarctic. Only some of the networks of Indigenous people live in what we call developed nations, and there's a strong association between Australian Aboriginal people, Maori people from Aotearoa, the American peoples in the Americas and peoples in the Nordic country, because we are all Indigenous people who live within developed nations. But most of the world's Indigenous people live pretty much in their own country, in third world conditions. It's really interesting to note that China and India together have more than half of the world's Indigenous people. And that's such an untapped network of knowledge and information about this world that we live in. We haven't even got anywhere near there, let alone tapping into our local knowledges. As you said, Aboriginal people are one of the 350 million peoples in the world, Indigenous peoples in the world. We have a saying that we try and spread far and wide. We say we are the oldest extant culture in the world. And extant means that we are the oldest continuously existing living culture in the world. Now we glibly say 40,000 years or 60,000 years, but some of us say, who cares? We're very happy to accept Maori for several hundred years and Native Americans for about 10,000 years. If you think about 60,000 years, we did this exercise in schools a long time ago. If you take an A4 sheet of paper and you divide it up into centimetre square blocks, you've actually got to go to a second A4 sheet of paper. So can you imagine centimetre square blocks? And that combined sheet, this whole paper, and a couple of rows on the next sheet, that represents 60,000 years of Aboriginal history in this landscape. Half of one of those centimetre blocks represents the shared history that we have as all Australians living in this country. So 60,000 years of history. Now you all know, you all grew up with this idea that traditional society was stable. Somehow or other, our traditional societies were able to live with each other, were able to live with themselves and with each other and with the landscape and with the spirit world and maintain some sort of sustainable lifestyle for 60,000 years. I don't even care if it's 25 generations. How did societies learn to put in place, how did they learn the knowledges and how did they learn the systems to put in place what we now in contemporary society recognise as the need for sustainable development? When I asked one of my northern colleagues from Kuki-Yalanji people, right up the top, and Kuki-Yalanji people, that's one of those 6 big language groups in rainforest people. Kuki-Yalanji people manage about 260,000 hectares of the World Heritage Area, more than a third of rainforest country. And when I asked one of their leaders, you know what you do, you've got to go and do a talk and you're not really sure about your topic, and I said, what am I going to talk about? They said, that's easy. Tell them we've got no sustainable development. And that really pulled me up. And then when you think about it, she's talking about where she finds her people and her role as leader. She's the co-chair. Her role as leader in contemporary society, trying to reach back into the knowledges of traditional society and trying to work out, how does she set out to try and support her people and their conditions in contemporary society. Despite the diversity of Indigenous people, the 350 million people right across the world, we have some really common themes that we face together. Of course, you all know the story. Most of that has been changed by what we call the march of colonialism. Interestingly, a lot of change has been caused by the spread of non-Indigenous religions, and you all know that, because we conquered, didn't we, for God, gold and country, whatever. And of course, in contemporary society, just this urgent pace that we all face around modernisation and development. Indigenous peoples right across the world have seen our traditional cultures eroded, those knowledges dissipated, and our land holdings, confiscated or signed away. And it wasn't just economic coercion that occurred during colonisation. There are many Indigenous people who would say under the process of native title that a lot of that land is still slipping away from us in these days. That sort of legacy has made Indigenous peoples the world over some of the most disadvantaged groups. And in Australia, we all worked together as communities about 40 years ago, and we all agreed to a referendum that said, yes, we recognise that all sorts of measures have to be put in place to try and address that disadvantage that we know that the first peoples of this country were under as a result of the colonisation. The world over, Indigenous people who stay in our traditional territories face destruction of our cultures and continued displacement of our lands. I'm just saying that that's an international picture. It's one of the commonalities that the 350 million Indigenous peoples face, particularly those of us who live in developed nations, but it plays out at local levels. We all value the fact that this beautiful country was protected through the World Heritage listing 20 odd years ago, and the work that was done 30 odd years ago amongst communities. And rainforest Aboriginal people treasure that. I stand on my country. One of the government agencies says this to me. He said, but Joann, you said that you really love the national parks because you stand on your country here and you look east across Wurundjeri, my national park, And I say, thank God it was protected, because it hasn't got buildings and farms and that sort of stuff. I stand 360 degrees now, what's that, 180, and I'm actually on my dairy farm, a European grandfather's farm, and I see all of this development in my country. He said, but Joann, you love it. You love the World Heritage listing, and I do. We really value it. But rainforest Aboriginal people are still coming to terms with, what does it mean? What does it mean for our sustainable development? That mob in the north aren't able to cut down a tree because it's World Heritage listed. So they can't, sell a turpentine tree for $6,000 or so because of the World Heritage listing. They can't do selective forest farming. We've got no idea what carbon farming means for our people because we can't go and replant rainforest, really. We've got to get around to those sorts of challenges. Of course, I'm trying to cut a little bit. So, we've all grown up with this. I just want to reiterate some of the challenges that Indigenous people face and what we've been doing. A couple of the major things that Indigenous people the world over are working on. We're all organising locally and regionally and nationally and interregionally and internationally to try and promote and get respect for our cultures and ways of life and full participation in the decisions that affect us. I thank CAFNet because you actually got me to think about some really seminal concept development work that we did a few years ago at the national scale, where we said we had 30 years of trying to address the disadvantage of Indigenous people. What did we need to do in the systemic institutional measures in this society? And we actually came up with something, would you believe it, we called it Capacity Building for Integrated Sustainable Development. So thank you, you actually got me to go back and have a look at some of that information and the knowledge and the really strong thinking that a few of us were trying to do. Now we came back to say, well, what is it? What is it that sustained our people for 60,000 years? And what do we need to reach out for again? And we came up with a fairly, can I dare say, simple answer to that. We said we needed our people as individuals to be able to be strong in themselves. That's what we wish for all of our children, don't we? We want them to grow up to be able to be strong in themselves. We said we wanted Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people as the second Indigenous peoples in this country to be strong in kin, culture and country. Because we know that one of the things that sustained Indigenous societies for that 60,000 years is the systemic approach to culture, it's the systemic approach to social relationships, it's the systemic approach to how you live with country and how you live with spirits and how you live with people. So our second point was we wanted our people to be strong in kin, culture and country. And the third one is that we wanted them to be able to be strong in their ability to participate in the wider society as they so choose. That's what we wanted, but when I was thinking about this conference today, I still thought, I don't know if that's the answer. I don't know if that's the lesson that we learned from 60,000 years of Aboriginal history in this country, 60,000 years of sustainable living in this country. And I thought, what's the one thing? What's the absolute one thing? Why did a person grow up in a really systemised society, growing in knowledge right through from young years to early adulthood, to mid-adulthood, to eldership, the whole lifelong learning process? What was the absolute driving force that they knew what their place was in that society? That they knew how they had to relate to their extended families, to clan groups next to them, that there were all these systems in place? What did they know that they knew that they had to look after the environment around them, the plants, the animals, and the landscape? And what did they know that they had to live with the spirit of country? Right, so there's social development, their economic development, environmental development, what do I miss? Cultural development, and we would add another one, spiritual development, and you might even add another one. You know, we talk triple bottom line. We're all working quadruple. Some of us are saying we think it's six-dimensional bottom line. Social, economic, environmental, cultural development, personal, spiritual development, and civic, political development. Your participation in society. So that's contemporary speak. But what did people know? What was the absolute core thing? And I come down to one word. That people knew that their daily sustainability absolutely directly related to their survival. Their physical survival, their social survival, their spiritual survival in this country. So I wonder if that's the lesson that we can share from 60,000 years of sustainable development. How do we spread that knowledge? You know, you're all here, and I'm sure that you're like me and you try and extend it to your kids. How do we spread that message wider? That we have to work together and we have to put in place systemic approaches and get people to agree about their role in those systemic approaches, because bottom line, sustainable development is about all of our people, all humanity's survival, all biodiversity survival, and all landscape survival on this place that we call the Earth. Thank you.